Hey guys, welcome to another episode here in the lounge with myself, Phil Boileau, aka Sporting Phil, and my partner in crime here, Justin Rowan, aka Cavs Canada, or is it Cavs Canada or Cavs Canada? I'm always forgetting that one.
Cavs Canada. We'll go with
Cavs
that.
Canada. Perfect. And today we're covering the Cleveland Cavaliers and then a kind of a focused view on them going into the playoffs. They finished this season 53-29. And they're kicking off the playoffs. LeBron James back in action after skipping town of Miami Heat after they lost in the finals last year to the San Antonio Spurs. We're going to look at now is let's look at them in a microcosm. The Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, Justin, what do you think is their obvious strength? And let's be a bit honest, what do you think is their obvious weakness?
Well, I think their strength is obviously their offensive ability. When you look at three guys in LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love that have established themselves in this league as three of the best scorers out there, and you surround those guys with shooters and players that can complement what they bring offensively, it's when they're clicking it, they're one of the most dangerous offenses in the league. So what they can do as a unit and individually probably is their greatest strength, at least when you're looking at the offensive side of the floor. When you're looking at weaknesses, depth is obviously a concern. Matthew Dellavedova gives a lot of effort, but overall, like he's a backup point guard, but he's probably a third string. They do have a tendency to give up a lot of bench points to guards as a result of his play. And I mean, defense is an issue at times. Lack of focus and effort. They've shown a high defensive ceiling, but they haven't shown consistency throughout the season on that side of the floor. So if their shots aren't falling and they have to rely on defense, it might be a bit of a concern, or there might be some hiccups in the playoffs.
Okay, and obviously, as the adage goes, defense wins championships. So this could be a bit of a worry, but we've seen with the addition of Ivan Shumpert, Mozgov, and such, they've tried to bring in these guys to surround LeBron James, who a lot of people forget is one of the best defenders at his position, or maybe slipping at certain levels, but still can definitely hold his own. Now, when we're talking about that offense, obviously, come playoff time, the games slow down. This is a great team when it comes to full court basketball, and I'm sure they'll be trying to push that. But are you worried about this basketball team in a half court set for a long period of time?
I'm honestly not that concerned about it. One of my biggest complaints in covering the Cavs this season was that they didn't go on and push the pace as much as you think. It's the same thing we really saw with Miami. Miami, even though you thought of them as a fast break team, they had the slowest pace in the league. The Cavs have played at a really slow offensive pace all season long. While they do get their breakouts on steals and stuff like that and those transition points, they really don't push the tempo, and they do execute a lot in the half court. Um, would I be concerned in their half court play? I do think it has a bit of a tendency to get stagnant, and they get a little too in love with the hero ball. But overall, like a lot of their offensive execution throughout the season, especially post after those trades, has come in the half court. So that's not one of my biggest concerns when I look at this team.
Okay, and in the same vessel there, we're talking about offense. When it comes down to clutch shots, I mean, we've been speaking of these big names, these big three. Do you think they've more or less figured out how to deal with that? We need a big bucket right now. Who's going to take this shot? I mean, Kyrie's put up big numbers. Love over Skriz put up big numbers. Obviously, LeBron James. Do you think that is going to be a question, or do you think at this point they figured that one out?
There weren't the same odd hiccups that there was with the Heat year one. There seems to be a bit of a hierarchy set. If they really needed to, LeBron to the basket is one of the best options in the NBA. Kyrie Irving can obviously get those buckets as well, but when it comes to clutch shooting, if you have LeBron and Kevin Love to account for, you aren't able to zone in on Kyrie the same way that you were able to in the past. And in the past, he's shown himself to be one of the best clutch shooters in the league. And this year, I mean, it's more of the same thing. Like they get him free, they get him open, and trust in his ability to create space and hit that 3-point shot. With Miami year one, LeBron and Dwayne Wade, I mean, Dwayne Wade isn't a good three-point shooter. LeBron was just starting to establish himself as a shooter. So when they need that clutch three, there was a bit of an awkward exchange there. Kyrie Irving's proven to be a clutch shooter and a great three-point shooter. So he seems to be the go-to in those situations.
Absolutely, and I suppose with Miami, I suppose Chris Bosh was taking that role a bit more towards the end there. But before we look at who they're going to be facing, I want to ask you, besides the big three, because it seems always in the playoffs,
Mm-hmm.
no matter the sport, there's always that X factor. There's that guy who steps up and makes the difference. Who do you think outside of those big three is going to be that guy for the Cavs this postseason?
You know, this is a really tough call to make because one, you look at J.R. Smith and how he's performed down the stretch. I mean, got to rep the J.R. He's been ridiculous. He's been lights out, especially when you have to account for those big three. He can, I mean, he's a shot maker. That's what he does. But my biggest X factor, I think, would be Tristan Thompson coming in off the bench. He's been the guy that they've gone to in fourth quarters to close out games playing at center. If you're looking at a close game where, let's say, you need a bucket, even if you miss, he's one of the top three offensive rebounders in the league over his entire career. Like, he's been fantastic in that. He's going to create those extra opportunities. He's a great defender. He's versatile. He can switch on to wings for a possession, even on the defensive end. So what he can do, the versatility he brings, and those extra possessions that he can bring, I'd give him my nod as the X factor for the Cavs.
All right, perfect. So let's dive in, and obviously their first round. And we just wrote an article about this against the Boston Celtics. So I don't think many people give Boston much of a chance. Maybe, I've heard stealing one game, maybe two on the really extreme ends, but they should have a fairly easy time. I mean, you can't take any team for granted in the NBA, but I mean, this is as close as you're going to get. Now, when we're talking about a team that can give the Cavs fits, out of all the teams that are in the East, let's say East centric, what team do you think the Cavs would want to avoid?
Well, I mean, the team that they'd want to avoid, which is very unlikely that they're going to be able to avoid, is the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks execute perfectly offensively. They're a mirror image of the San Antonio Spurs. And that kind of offense is going to give a Cavs defense that might have some questions fits in the playoffs. They're versatile. They're deep. They have almost everyone on the team can defend and hit shots and stretch the floor. They're a really tough matchup. Timothy Mozgov has made a huge difference on defense for the Cavaliers, but you can't really play him against an Al Horford, at least not consistently, because Horford's going to take him out to that 16, 17 feet, and even though he's mobile, that's a big time assignment for him.
No, absolutely. And again, that pushes your Tristan Thompson mold, being a little bit more mobile, being able to walk around with both about the same height of the 6'8", 6'9", depending what website you're stealing your lies
6'10",
from.
6'10".
Yeah, we'll say 6'10", sure. Okay, so that's a bit of an obvious one, being the number one seed. Now, when we're looking at the other guys, limit contenders, so we're probably talking about Washington, Toronto, and Chicago. I mean, we could talk about the rest, but really probably not, right? So out of those three,
Right.
who do you think Cleveland is like, I can really see myself well, maybe they would never admit to that, but who would you think would be the worst matchup for them of Toronto, Washington, and the Chicago Bulls?
Well, I don't think Toronto or Washington is really going to be on the radar because, one of them is going to be knocked out in the first round, and then in all likelihood, there's no chance either team beats Atlanta round two. So, the Chicago Bulls obviously have to be the focus there. The Bulls, they hate LeBron. They hate the Cavs. It's a rivalry. My biggest concern, honestly, with the Bulls is cheap shots. It's going to be a physical series, and even if the Bulls aren't the ones that beat the Cavs, they're the type of team that could potentially wear them down if the Cavs let them hang. That they might not be at full strength when they're going up against Atlanta, or they might be a little worn out, especially if they cruise through the first round with Boston. if you don't have a real test going into round 2 against the Bulls, who are well coached, they're deep, they're physical, they're big, you might experience some trouble there.
Okay, so you're talking more trouble. I don't hear it in your voice that you really think it's going to be more than like some grade of a speed bump as opposed to a stop, right? If they have to face
Right.
Chicago.
Yeah. Which
Or,
really, if I'm looking at the teams in the East, like if the Cavs are in the West, I'd be concerned with those stops. Like this team can beat up on them. But when you're looking at the East, I mean, they dominated the Bulls all season, with the exception of one game. Um, it, I don't really see anything other than speed bumps in the Eastern Conference, with the exception of Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta's the one team that you could potentially see an upset there. I don't know if you can even call it an upset because they are the number 1 seed. But overall, the first 2 rounds, the speed bump is probably the most you could expect.
absolutely. And then finally getting to the Western Finals, I mean, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. There's 8 legitimate teams going there in the West. And do you think the Cavs, because look, let's be honest, the first half of the season wasn't the best for the Cavs, a lot of learning experiences, but it was to be expected. New coach, new players. So to me, how you have to judge the Cavaliers is the second half of the season, and they were spectacular. Do you think that version of
Right.
the Cleveland Cavaliers can legitimately stand up to most of these West teams have been together for a few years, so the continuity is already there. I mean, you can go top to bottom,
Mm-hmm.
even with a young team like the Pelicans, who probably aren't getting that far. Let's be honest. But do you think? Well, I mean, it's a tough matchup, right? Golden State, although I love the Brow.
Right.
But do you think that Cleveland is in a spot where they'll do really well, can really contend in the East, but then fall to whoever they have to play? Or do you think that they had that legitimate chance because of all the star power? Like, to me, if this was year 2 or 3 of the Cavs, I don't think I would be asking this question, like, because I think it would be an obvious they're contenders. But have they defined the roles? Have they understood how things are going to run enough to, play against the top dogs in the West?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, at the start of the season, I thought the Cavs would make the finals, but lose in the finals ultimately. It really does depend on matchup. I'd say if they face the Golden State Warriors, they have a really good chance. I mean, they played the Warriors twice this season. They had one game that was a close loss, but that was without LeBron James. Timothy Mozgov had just joined the team that day, so he had never had a practice with the team. And J.R. Smith had only played one game with the Cavs prior to that. He hadn't had a practice with the team yet. Shumpert was out, and that was a close loss to the Warriors. The one game that they had at full strength against Golden State, they decimated them. I think they won by 25 points. So if it's the Warriors, I'd give them a legitimate shot. If it's the Spurs, that's when all of a sudden that continuity that you spoke about before, their composure, the force that they have, Kawhi Leonard on LeBron, I wouldn't consider the Cavs by any stretch of the imagination, and that's not a knock on Golden State. So much of the NBA comes down to matchups. Against the Golden State Warriors, Houston Rockets, Dallas Mavericks, or even Los Angeles Clippers, I would pick the Cavs in those series. Spurs, you have to bow down to the defending champs.
Exactly. So would you say that the Cavs play better against a team that enjoys going up and down, like maybe a Golden State, or a team that likes to slow it down and grind and take advantage of your athleticism, like a Memphis kind of thing?
I'd say what their weakness is when they're facing a team. Their weakness is teams that don't have one focal point on the offense. Like with the Warriors, a lot of it comes through Stephen Curry. In my mind, he's the MVP. He stirs the pot for that team. You can hone in on him and slow things down. And if you can slow things down, if you can put an Amon Shumpert or an improved defensive Kyrie Irving on Steph Curry, you can kind of take some things away from them. You can put LeBron at the 4 and he can abuse Draymond Green, no matter how good defensively he is. In that matchup, LeBron destroyed them. Where they struggle is with teams like Atlanta and San Antonio, that there isn't one guy that you can focus on. They move the ball, they take the right shots, they're methodical. Even if their shots aren't falling, they're going to just execute the same thing over and over again because they know they're going to get quality looks and they're capable of knocking those down. So those are the type of teams that I would fear against the Cavaliers. And like I said, that's why I don't necessarily fear a Golden State or a Houston.
All right, no, I'm getting that one, and so hopefully, although it's funny, right? Because those two teams that you're describing is essentially Atlanta and San Antonio, which seem like on a collision course for each other. But I'm thinking, is that something that the NBA really wants to see? I'm thinking the NBA really would rather see LeBron and Co. than Atlanta in the finals. I mean, we're just talking ratings, right? When we're like, I'm actually really excited to see J.R. Smith, like we were talking about him as a key point in offense. He's kind of that heat check guy. You know, his ability to show his maturation. Because I think that's something that hasn't been spoken about enough. Like he says, he made a comment early on in the season that, you know, it's Cleveland. Like I can't really get myself in trouble here. There's not as much to do, and I think his maturation has been huge. Iman Shumpert's ability to take roles. He was kind of starting there in New York behind Tim Hardaway Jr. and coming in and playing, splitting those minutes. I think one guy, and I was giving him credit before on another show, who's not getting enough credit, I feel, is David Blatt. As much as LeBron's been the leader and such, when you take this many new pieces, a new coach, he's never coached in the NBA. I mean, I just think what he's done, even though you have LeBron James, is tremendous this year. And I'm really looking forward to seeing them play. And as much as I love Brad Stevens, he'll be playing golf soon enough. All right, guys. Well, listen, thanks for joining us for another episode here on the Lounge. Make sure to follow Justin and myself on Twitter all playoff long, and we'll be bringing you lots of new stuff. Check us out this Sunday, and every Sunday we'll have some live streaming commentary shows and games, and look out for more articles and such. We're growing the team here, and make sure to like and comment and share. So from Justin Rowan and Phil Boileau, I want to say thanks for everyone joining, and keep it in the lounge.